Hey guys, welcome back to Ripe Stories. In this video, a ridiculous Karen forbids me from using my own private pool, claiming it violates federal law. Let's dive right into the story. The title story starts like this. Nearly a decade ago, I experienced a life-altering disability. At first I thought it wouldn't be so bad and that some of the pain would just fade away and I would be able to adjust to my new circumstances. Unfortunately, it turns out I was dead wrong. Every day was agony, and even worse than the physical pain was the miserable realization that I would never be able to live life like I used to. Every day I would be reminded of just how little I could accomplish all on my own. I know you want to get to the meat and potatoes of the story. I just want to give you some idea of how bad things were when I finally found the most unexpected solution. On a whim, a friend dragged me to the pool and practically forced me to get in. I loved her so much for that. I thought it would be terribly embarrassing and I needed help for every little thing, but the moment I got in the water, it was like all the pain just vanished. Suddenly, I could move around and just as easily as everyone else, as if my accident had never even happened. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I cried tears of joy. After that, it became a foregone conclusion that I was gonna get a pool of my own. It didn't matter how hard it would be or how much it would cost, I was gonna make sure that I could enjoy swimming every single day. It took years, but after a lot of blood, sweat and tears, I eventually made my dream come true and finally had a private pool installed in my backyard. It's not hyperbole to say that it's my single favorite place in the world now. As you might have guessed, this is where Karen, not her real name, comes into the story. Not even a month after the finishing touches were put on my pool, I got a visit from a neighbor that I'd never particularly liked. A loud, abrasive woman that acted like she was still part of a gossipy high school clique. I swam every day without fail, sometimes several times a day, so it wasn't much of a coincidence that I happened to be swimming when Karen pounded on my front door. I could hear her knocking from the backyard, but I sure as hell was not gonna get out just to see who it was. However, I really was not expecting her to stomp through my side yard, opening the gate and letting herself in as if she owned the place. With her hands on her hips, she marched right up to the edge of my pool, huffing and puffing. She looked everything over in distaste, including me. Honestly, I have no idea what her problem was. I wish I could point to one event in the past where I maybe accidentally did her wrong, perhaps by ignoring her when she said hello, but as far as I could remember, we had barely ever had any interactions at all. If I had to guess, I would say she just didn't like the look of me, but I cannot imagine why. Anyway, after her very rude staring, the first thing out of her mouth was, "Don't you know this is illegal? Your pool is violating federal law. Disabled people should not be allowed to have private pools. They could die." Naturally, I asked her what on earth she was talking about, and to this day, I'm not sure if I understood her correctly, but she went on to gesture broadly at my pool and quote some sort of legal jargon about federal disability protections. I'm sure you can imagine my confusion because here I was thinking that disability protections were somehow related to protecting the disabled. Crazy, right? Well, now it sounds too ridiculous to even consider, but I think she was somehow arguing that my pool was somehow violating my own rights. My own pool, the one I just had installed. Violating my rights. But she was not even done yet. Before I could get over my confusion and tell her to get out of my yard, she looked me over and got a truly disgusted look in her eyes. "That is just horribly indecent," she sneered. "How dare you wear that when there are kids around? When there are husbands around? Disabled people shouldn't display themselves in public in bikinis. That is disgusting." Well, that's right, apparently she was jealous of the way I looked when wearing a bikini in the comfort of my own backyard. Mind you, I have a pretty tall fence, so there's no way any kids are seeing into my yard, and I don't think even the tallest of men in the neighborhood could see in without making a concerted effort and standing on their toes. No, I did not buy her nonsense about the children just for a moment. I knew that she was jealous and I hadn't the faintest clue why. I've never flirted with any of the men in my neighborhood, married or otherwise. Looking back, maybe she caught her husband looking at me or mentioning me, but that would just be my guess. I honestly cannot even remember what the guy looked like in any event. What can you even say when someone barges into your yard and starts babbling like a madwoman? I could barely manage to stare at her and she just stared right back, looking as triumphant and vindicated as could be. This woman actually thought she had stunned me speechless with her brilliant attack. That, more than anything else, is what finally shocked me out of it. I pointed out that this was private property and politely asked her to leave. Mind you, it was not the sort of politeness that comes from managing to control your temper, but the sort of stealth politeness that comes when you cannot even think of what to say, so you fall back on ingrained manners. Somehow, me being cordial just set her off even more. The next thing I knew, she was going off about how she was gonna call the police, file a complaint with the city, get the HOA involved, the whole 9 yards. I've no idea why she thought the HOA would come last in that list, but maybe she thought it was supposed to be the most terrifying threat of all. And to that tirade, I could only nod with a frozen smile on my face and invite her to go do exactly that. I was almost certain that she was gonna storm off and never talk to me again out of embarrassment, but part of me was actually fascinated by the idea that she might be deluded enough to believe there was a valid complaint somewhere in her vendetta. To my shock, it ended up being the second. Apparently, she did file a complaint with the city. However, I questioned just how seriously they were taking it when I was notified not by the city, but rather by Karen herself, who proudly sent me a copy of the city's response. To her, it read like they were taking her issues very seriously, but as far as I could tell, it was just a generic automated response thanking her for filing a complaint and reassuring her that they would get around to it eventually. Maybe. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong yet again. Karen also began to spread rumors around the block, trying to turn all our neighbors against me. Did I find out about this because my social network slowly dwindled as former friends and neighbors started shunning me? Well, no. I was told directly by said friends and neighbors that some crazed woman was trying to rope them into a bizarre crusade against my pool. Around this point, I couldn't help but feel a little bad for the woman. This kind of incompetence and lack of self-awareness is just plain embarrassing for everyone who has to witness it. While all this was quite entertaining, I also realized that this woman might just be crazy enough to escalate if she saw that her tactics were not working. I started to document everything that was happening, along with a timeline to make it clear that I was getting harassed just about every day, albeit indirectly most of the time. And sure enough, just a couple of weeks after Karen's declaration of war, I got a surprise visit from the police. Or at least it would have been a surprise visit if she hadn't marched up to my house for the last 3 days in a row, banging on the front door and loudly informing me that the police would be here any minute to enforce the city's laws, whatever that meant. Well, as such, it was almost a relief when the police finally did roll up without any sirens blaring. When the officers got out, they looked more bored than anything else. After so many days of anticipation, it was a rather uneventful visit. They mentioned there were some complaints about public indecency, and I told them I had been wearing a bikini in my pool, and then they asked to see the pool. I had been a little worried up until I saw the exasperated looks on their faces as they inspected my backyard. It was very clear that absolutely nobody could accidentally see me swimming from outside. Just like that, with a few tired apologies for wasting my time, the officers left. Immediately afterwards, I felt relieved that my anxiety had been for nothing. However, that was quickly replaced by furious, righteous indignation. Why should Karen be allowed to ruin my peace of mind like this? How dare she, right? I needed to put her in her place and make sure she couldn't harass anyone else like this, and to completely cut her off at the knees, I needed a lawyer specializing in disability rights. Somewhat to my surprise, it was much easier than I expected. I figured that it might be hard to find a lawyer that took my case seriously, but just outlining the basic facts of my case was enough to have 3 separate firms courting me. When I finally picked one, I went with all the evidence I had gathered, including threatening messages from Karen, recordings of her yelling at my front door, and messages from neighbors warning me about the latest rumors she had been spreading. When my lawyer read through them, she was practically giddy with glee. She told me this was going to be the easiest case of her career so far. She then went on to outline just what kinds of damages I might expect, and I was shocked to see the numbers. When I got home, I almost felt a little bad for Karen and was considering the lighter end of the spectrum. Surely, Karen did not deserve to have her life ruined just for being a jerk, plus she had a husband who was probably innocent. But as luck would have it, she chose that very evening to pound on my front door with her husband standing sheepishly behind her. She was preening like a peacock, sneering in my face that I was gonna regret ignoring her warnings. You see, her husband was actually pals with a bunch of lawyers at his golf club, and they were all working right at this moment to come up with a lawsuit and possibly even criminal charges. That did it. I politely thanked Karen and Mr. Karen for the information and then closed the door in their faces. Now that I thought about it, they were pretty well off, weren't they? Perhaps going for the throat with a larger settlement wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. Honestly, the lawsuit and the money were not even the best part. Over the next few weeks, as things got squared away with my lawyer, I started offhandedly mentioning to my friends in the neighborhood. Nothing too wild, just mentioning how thankful I would be when all this was over because it seemed to be such a cut and dry case. Naturally, that led to my neighbors asking what the hell I was talking about, so I sheepishly told them some of the details of my legal troubles. How could I ever have predicted that the gossip would spread like wildfire and that every single person in our neighborhood soon knew that I had an airtight case against Karen for harassment? It was completely unforeseeable, I assure you. Needless to say, Karen did not have a great time after that. I heard through the grapevine that there were loud arguments in her house even before she was formally notified about the specifics of the lawsuit. Apparently her husband did not like being part of her so-called reckless childish games, to hear how one neighbor put it. At once they did hear about the lawsuit, moving trucks showed up soon after. I wonder if he thinks that getting a quick divorce will spare him from having to pay out the lawsuit. Maybe he's right, I didn't bother to ask. I've been far too busy enjoying my pool and mostly ignoring my nemesis as her life crumbles around her. I'm not an entirely cold-hearted person though. Perhaps I will invite her over to enjoy my pool one of these days. And the next one is titled, "Two of my employees are harassing their disabled coworker. What can I do?" So I manage a small digital marketing firm. The owner is usually in the background doing big stuff like networking and bringing in sponsors or big clients. I do almost all the hiring, and we use a virtual assistant HR company that tends to just forward me complaint emails, which is a separate issue. We have one staff member who has been with us since the company formed 10 years ago. Lola has an amazing creative mind, produces great work, and our clients adore her. Our last 3 major accounts we landed because of word of mouth that Lola works for us and is alone. She's also a joy to work with, very friendly and a hard worker. I don't have any negatives about her performance over the 10 years I've worked with her. Lola has been very open with us about some medical needs she has. She's been open with the whole team, so it's not a huge secret or hush-hush, especially since her condition is degenerative, so she will slowly lose functionality over time. We have even all joined 5K runs as an office in her name, and when we had a chance to donate to a charity, it's almost always to charities that represent research for Lola's condition. I always thought that as an office we had her back even before the pandemic. I noticed our younger go-getter staff, 2 in particular who need a lot of attention and reassurance, complaining about Lola not meeting deadlines, and the complaints increased drastically since the pandemic started. Lola works at a different pace than the rest of the team, but she is not missing deadlines. If something is due at noon on Tuesday, she has it submitted by 11:45 on Tuesday. That's not late or past a deadline. When we do project management, we set realistic goals and timelines for everybody on the project, taking into account the pandemic, childcare, access to materials, just all of it. We consider the entire team's needs and the clients, not just Lola's. But I have the 2 staff who complain a lot that Lola's behind or not working as fast as they would like, both of whom even went so far as to exclude her from a project and finish her work for her, which was unnecessary since number 1, the work they turned in was not what the client wanted and caused rework, and number 2, they still had 4 weeks left until the deadline for a first draft. Both employees were told to stop doing that multiple times, and they were put on different projects so that they didn't need to monitor Lola's progress. Their bosses, who both report to me, agree with me that we should keep them off teams with Lola, but there's overlap in skill that we require for some projects. I just found out from our HR person that they've escalated their complaints about Lola to the owner, and their complaints are backed with no evidence about her inability to do her job on time, as well as a complaint about me that favoritism prevents me from making Lola meet her deadlines. Keeping them off project with Lola and not pairing them up for other work is their main evidence of my so-called favoritism. I think their behavior is based on ableism, and I know it's 100% not rooted in fact. If we lose Lola as an employee, I have no doubt in my mind that our clients would go with her. The owner is frustrated that it's even come up and wants me to just handle it. My idea of handling it would be to advise those 2 employees in particular, nobody else backed up their HR complaint, to maybe find work elsewhere. What direction do I take with this? And yeah guys, if you would have been in this unfortunate situation, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. Update to the story: the day your answer came out, Lola asked to meet with me. We are still meeting via video since the pandemic has been in an upswing in our area. She's leaving to start her own company. While she was not aware of the behavior of the 2 staff members in question, she still felt it was time for her to move on, regardless, since she is getting a lot of attention in other places. We had the unpleasant choice of promoting one of the complainants to Lola's position until they both started bragging on social media. Another staff shared it to us out of concern for Lola that they got her fired and are celebrating, which caused a huge backlash and at least 5 people almost quit. Did I mention that we have a very small team of under 20? We did as much damage control as we could, and now we have 3 openings to fill. One of the commenters stated now is a great time to hire with so many hardworking people out of a job, and I have to say our executive team agrees. I wrote back and asked, am I reading correctly that you did end up firing the 2 who were complaining about her? We did. Yes. It became a kind of "you cannot fire me, I quit" type of thing, but they were obviously not happy with us. Ironically, this morning I got contacted by a temp agency saying that they had a great freelancer since we had openings. It was one of the 2. Lola was able to point some people our way, so all in all, as much as I wish we could have avoided that, I'm happy for her, and we have some great leads and don't have to worry about ableist and harassing behavior. Interesting comment. I call BS on Lola not knowing, she just didn't say anything. There's no way you don't notice in your tiny workplace of 20 people where 2 of them are loudly complaining about you to anyone who will listen, especially when they are stealing your work and screwing it up. At least 5 other people were aware of this happening and upset about it. That's a quarter of the workforce. Why did they have to promote one of the troublemakers? That is literally rewarding them for their harassment. No wonder they were bragging on social media. In their eyes, that's exactly what seems like happened. They ran the disabled person out and the company was gonna reward one of them with her job, and they only got in trouble because they started posting publicly about it. Also, this happened during the height of the pandemic. There was probably no shortage of qualified people who were looking for a job. OP and his company didn't do crap for Lola, and they only got off their asses once it started making them look bad and lost business and were about to lose them employees. And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this story in the comments. I think the last comment we read was pretty much spot on here. Either way, the next one is a petty revenge story. My neighbor's son, Garth, graduated college about this time last year and got his first full-time career job at a company. He is in the IT department of a branch office and does IT things. Total number of employees at this office is around 20, some are sales, some work in the office, and Karen is the office manager. When Garth first started, there were 3 IT people. They had an office in the basement away from the rest of the employees. This suited Garth just fine. He is a quiet, introverted young man. Highly intelligent, but he is not a social person. Would rather spend his time off gaming than live interactions. As you can imagine, he is not a big kid, maybe a $1.50 after eating a big steak for dinner. The 2 other IT people eventually move on to other jobs and corporate does not replace them. Now, Garth has 3 times the work without receiving a raise. Garth voices his concerns to Karen about workload and call-outs, and he gets the standard feeble corporate responses and condescending lecture. I don't know why he didn't quit then, but he stuck it out, hoping to eventually be recognized for his worth, etc. Whenever I spoke with him, he would say how bad it was working for Karen, but his saving grace was that he was in his solitary office most of the day and did not have much contact with her. Until one day back in February. He got a phone call from Karen telling him to come upstairs. Upon arriving, he is directed to start moving furniture around. Garth takes a look around and tells Karen his job does not call for moving heavy objects. Karen gets loud and calls his manhood into question in front of everyone, but Garth does not budge. Life changed for Garth after that. Karen had decided to make work miserable for him. She started repeatedly writing him up for whatever she could think up, but here comes the petty revenge. So Garth starts snooping and discovers that Karen is having an affair with a married coworker. Their work phones are synced up to the computer system, which Garth has access to. Garth has created a mass corporate email with various screenshots of the sexting. He rigged it to be sent out today from her own email account. The beauty of it all? Garth walked in Friday and tendered his resignation to corporate HR. He left his ID card and whatever else on Karen's desk. Karen made a big deal of shouting to Garth as he was leaving to not let the door hit him in the ass on the way out. When the email is sent out, they may well suspect that Garth was the perpetrator, but they will never be able to prove it. I can only hope Garth's revenge is sweet and spectacular. And yeah, Ripe stars, if you have watched until here, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and maybe even like the video, since that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. This is not my story, but my friend Adam's. Adam is a retired police officer, and this takes place in the mid-90s, back when Adam was a beat cop, maybe a year or two into his service. At the time this story takes place, a firebug had targeted several businesses over the course of a 3-month period. The fires were put out, but they were getting bigger and bigger, causing thousands of dollars in damage. Everyone was on edge, and the police were patrolling the area every night to try and catch Mr. Firebug. On this particular night in the middle of February, Adam and his partner, Rick, drew the short stick and thus were assigned to patrol part of the area. While on patrol, he notices a classic Mercedes-Benz pulling up to a house, and a familiar lady dressed in a thick fur coat steps out. He groans. It's the wife of a local business owner that every officer in town have had the displeasure to ticket for various parking and traffic violations. It would have been fine if she were a nice lady or something, but no, her 3 default sentences were, "Don't you know who I am? Where's your manager supervisor? And I will have your job." Seriously, she was a Karen before Karens were even a thing. Rick points out to Adam that Karen had parked right by a fire hydrant. Par for the course, Adam gets ready and steps out of the squad car. "Good evening, Mrs. Entitled, ma'am," Adam said. "What are you doing here?" Karen bellowed. Adam guessed that that is the Karen version of the word hello. Working the beat. "Do you know you park next to a fire hydrant?" "So?" Karen said. "I'm suggesting you move it before I write you a ticket. I'm not in the mood for extra paperwork tonight." "Listen, you need to leave my car alone, or I will have your job." With that, Karen storms off to the house, goes inside and slams the door. Adam thought, "If you say so?" and proceeded to check the outside of the car for any more violations, and wishing that being a Karen was a federal offense. As he is putting the ticket under the windshield wiper, the call everyone's been dreading comes on the radio. A fire alarm has been triggered, the address right across the street. Adam looks over at the building and can see a faint orange glow in the windows on the 2nd floor. He reports the glow. He and Rick get ready in case Mr. Firebug decides to cross their path. Several officers arrive and set a perimeter around the building as the glow gets brighter and brighter. Unfortunately, by the time the fire department gets there, flashover happens and all the windows on the 2nd floor get blown out. It was so hot that Adam felt sweat form on his face. The fire department need to get the hoses set up, but Karen's car is in the way. Using safety hammers, they break the windows and run the hoses through, getting everything set up in record time. During all of the chaos, Karen comes out and she sounds like a banshee that had swallowed an air raid siren. She runs over and tries unhooking the hose from the hydrant. "What are you doing? My car is ruined!" It took 2 officers to restrain her and bark at her to go get inside and let everyone do their jobs. She actually listened and returned inside. Adam spent the rest of his shift helping with the fire and investigation. It was close to dawn when he returned to the station to finish up. All he wanted was to go home and crawl into bed. That is when his supervisor calls Rick and him over and reports that Karen reported several $1,000s worth of damage. Not only had her windows been broken, but water had gotten in and froze because it was, again, the middle of February. The supervisor asked them what happened and they reported everything. Fortunately, the dashcam caught a recording of the event. The supervisor shook her head, laughed and said, "Well, you had nothing to do with the car getting damaged, so I consider this closed." A few weeks later, they caught the firebug, a different business owner who was trying to commit insurance fraud. He figured that if several other buildings caught fire, nobody would think he was responsible for burning down his own business. Unfortunately, Karen never did seem to learn her lesson, so she was back to racking up tickets and being a thorn in the police's side. She did have to pay for the damages and the ticket Adam gave her. And before we end the video, we will read a story from r/petty revenge. It is about a vehicle dealership that tried to scam OP. So this happened a few years back now. I was looking for a car and saw my local motorbike dealership was selling a little car, was their runabout. They said they had 2 and did not need both of them, which seemed legit. I trusted them to be trusty, so asked almost no questions. I'm a young, dumb-looking white chick and they were hasty to sell it to me. They informed me it used a little oil, but that's pretty normal for an older car. Little did they know, I understand engines very very well, and I drove it a lot, and quickly I identified something was very off even though it seemed normal. They had tried to mask an engine that was about to blow, and I knew my rights. I took it back, fluttered my big dumb eyelashes, and said it seems to be using a little more oil than the legal parameters for it to be sold as a roadworthy vehicle, and because I spotted it in under 4 weeks, they are liable for its replacement. They were pretty shocked to say the least, tried to worm their way out of it, but I knew they knew. One shiny replacement, upgraded engine at their cost later, my car will just go and go forever. I'm over the moon with my car 4 years later, and that new engine is singing. And yeah guys, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you again tomorrow.